I've been working as a long-haul truck driver since I was 25, and in that time I've racked up countless night shifts and naturally a fair number of strange encounters. Over the years I've handled deliveries for a variety of companies, often making runs across state lines to drop off cargo at retail stores or warehouses. One particular job had me driving all the way across California, hauling a full load of wooden furniture. The route took me mostly through open desert roads. I got started later in the day than I'd planned, so I already knew the majority of that drive would take place after dark, given how flat and deserted those roads are at night. Almost no traffic long. Straightaways, I figured I could cruise a bit faster than I would anywhere else. That's why when I spotted a vehicle's hazard lights blinking faintly in the distance, I had to hit the brakes harder than usual to slow my truck down. In time, I finally pulled up behind the car, an older model Chevy Impala parked just off the road in the sandy shoulder. I climbed out of the cab, deciding to do the decent thing and check if someone needed assistance. I walked up to the driver's side window and gave it a knock. No answer. I leaned down to peer inside, squinting through the tinted glass. There didn't appear to be anyone in the driver's seat or in any of the others. I circled the car to double check, but it was clearly empty. That's when I turned to look out into the quiet desert. Visibility wasn't great. I could only see about 20 yards ahead before the blackness swallowed everything up. Still, I felt oddly motivated that night to help however I could, so I returned to my truck, reached under the passenger seat, and grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight I keep in the toolbox. The beam was intensely bright, the kind that made it painful to look at head-on. As soon as I flicked it on, it illuminated a rundown gas station just off the road. I must have missed it before, probably because the entire area was just packed dirt, no paved lot or concrete. There were only 2 gas pumps, and behind them stood a small, weathered building that once looked like a typical roadside mini-mart. My assumption was that whoever owned the car had gone inside. I walked up to the entrance, where the door was permanently stuck open. As I stepped in and swept the flashlight across the room, I saw what was left of what had probably been a small convenience store. It made sense that a place like this wouldn't last long out in the middle of nowhere. I called out to announce myself, letting anyone inside know I was just trying to help. The beam of the flashlight barely echoed in the quiet space, but something about the subtle acoustics gave me goosebumps. A moment later, I heard what sounded like a foot dragging against the floor somewhere behind a row of old shelves. Again, I called out, asking if anyone needed assistance. Then I heard a deep, raspy voice that simply said, "Leave." That was it. I understood the word clearly, I just couldn't make sense of why it was said like that. I could also hear heavy breathing from a corner of the room. That was enough for me. I turned around and headed straight for the exit. As I walked back toward the truck, I heard a scream. It was jarring enough to make me pause, confused about whether I had actually heard it or not. For a few seconds I just stood there, uncertain if it was real. Then panic set in. I rushed back to the truck and immediately dialed 911. The dispatcher asked for my exact location, but I couldn't provide one. All I could say was that I was near an abandoned gas station off some desert highway. They told me to stay on the line and help them pinpoint the area. But right then, the Impala, the one that had been parked up ahead, suddenly roared to life and sped off down the road. I hadn't even noticed anyone get into it. It had been so dark, and I'd been so focused on the phone call. I rushed back inside the store to check if anyone was still in there, keeping the dispatcher on the line. I moved toward the part of the store where I'd heard the voice and breathing earlier, and what I found made my stomach drop a fresh puddle of blood on the floor. I told the dispatcher that I might have just walked into an active crime scene. Eventually, several highway patrol officers arrived. They asked for every detail I could give: what kind of car, what the driver looked like, what I heard. I told them it was a black, early 2000s Chevy Impala, and that a man had told me to leave. I also mentioned hearing a woman scream as the car sped away. There wasn't a body left behind, but I had a grim idea of what might have gone down. I assumed the officers collected samples from the scene, though I couldn't really provide much more. Regrettably, I didn't have a dash cam in the truck at the time, but I went out and got one installed just a few days later. That experience remains one of the most chilling things I've ever been through on the road, and it's something I'll never forget. I was on a nighttime delivery route, cruising mostly along deserted highways. At that hour, the only others sharing the road were a handful of other drivers hauling freight. Everything was smooth for the first few hours, pretty uneventful. Around 2 a.m., I stopped off at a truck stop to top off my fuel and use the restroom. I knew the next leg of the trip would take me through a long, remote stretch of forest, with few, if any, places to pull over. About an hour after that stop, something caught my attention up ahead. I didn't have much time to get a clear look, but I could see a figure standing by the edge of the road. To be clear, this wasn't anywhere near a town or even a side road, just deep woods in every direction. So seeing someone just standing there without a vehicle nearby instantly struck me as strange. What made it weirder was that the person didn't try to flag me down or signal for help. No gestures, no attempt to make contact at all, just standing there. I kept driving, but I couldn't shake the image from my mind. Then not even a mile later, I spotted another figure by the roadside. This time a woman. She was wearing torn jeans and a red hoodie. As I passed, our eyes locked. Her face showed no emotion, not angry, not sad, not afraid. Just blank cold, the kind of look that sends a chill straight down your spine. I actually shivered. I checked my side mirror as I drove by and saw her head turn, tracking my truck as I pulled away. Then the darkness swallowed her up. When I looked forward again, I nearly had a heart attack. I slammed on the brakes with everything I had, and I could feel the full weight of the truck shifting forward hard. Lying in the middle of the road was a person flat on their back, motionless. I couldn't tell if they were hurt, unconscious, or something worse, but nothing about the scene suggested an accident. No debris, no vehicle, no tire marks. It just didn't add up. Part of me felt like I should get out and check on them, but another part, the louder part, was screaming that something was off. I mean, 3 people within a mile in the middle of nowhere. That didn't seem like chance. I glanced out at the dense tree line on both sides. That uneasy feeling only grew stronger. I waited for maybe a full minute, weighing what to do before finally easing the truck forward and carefully steering around the figure. As soon as I cleared them and began driving again, I checked the mirror one last time. They weren't lying down anymore. They were standing, just standing in the road, staring at me as I pulled away. I stayed alert the rest of the night. My nerves were shot, and every shadow seemed like it might be another person waiting to step out. But that was it. No more figures, no more incidents. Looking back, I'm convinced it was some kind of setup, like they were trying to bait me into getting out of the truck. But if that's what it was, I can't even begin to guess what they would have done. And considering those other 2 people I saw earlier, who knows how many more might have been hiding just out of view in the woods beside me. Even now, thinking about it gives me chills. My name's Derek, and I've been working in long-haul trucking for nearly 15 years now. At this point, the job is second nature. Load the cargo, double-check, everything's correct, and get it to where it needs to go as quickly and efficiently as possible. Since we're not paid hourly, speed and reliability are everything. I take pride in being able to out-hustle the younger drivers getting into the game. But that mindset also means I've spent way too many nights pushing through with little to no rest. About 4 years ago, I was hauling for a distribution center based out of South Dakota. If you don't know, South Dakota's terrain is mostly flat, which makes for easier driving. It also made it tempting to skip rest breaks and stay ahead of the workload. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't always afford if I wanted to keep my job. It was an early Tuesday morning in May. The start of the week always brought in more shipments, and I had plenty to handle. I planned my trip into Montana carefully and decided I wouldn't stop to sleep at all. My goal was to finish the run in one stretch. I left a few hours after lunch, expecting to arrive around sunrise. I was cruising just a few miles over the speed limit, trying to shave off time. By the time the clock passed midnight, I was rubbing my eyes just to keep them open. I was exhausted, but there was less than an hour left in the drive, so I pressed on. When I first started in the industry, a friend of mine, Tristan, introduced me to ammonia inhalants, also known as smelling salts. They're little containers filled with strong chemicals that snap you awake the second you smell them. Not exactly healthy if used too often, but they do the job. They sting your nose and clear your head almost instantly. This was one of those nights I cracked one open and took a deep inhale. My head jerked back and my body tensed up from the jolt. It gave me just enough clarity to keep going for a little while longer. Another half hour crawled by. I was fighting to stay alert and started drifting off again. I snapped awake when I heard the rumble strips my tires had veered onto the shoulder. That was the wake-up call. It wasn't safe anymore. The highway was empty and the woods pressed close on both sides of the road. I started easing off the gas, scanning the area for a safe place to pull over. With the truck moving slowly, my headlights lit up more of the surroundings. That's when I spotted something bizarre, a purple dress lying right in the middle of the road. I squinted. Was I imagining it? I rubbed my eyes, blinked a few times, trying to clear my vision, but no, it was definitely there. I drove past it slowly, confused, too groggy to fully process how strange that was. Then, not even a quarter mile later, I passed a pair of shoes. That's when the unease started to kick in. I gripped the old cross my father had given me. He was deeply religious and hoped I wasn't losing my mind. I just needed a place to stop. But then I saw more items, random articles of clothing, and this time, it looked like some of it belonged to children. That's when I stopped the truck. I sat there in silence for a moment, engine idling, heart beginning to race. Nothing happened. Still, something in my gut felt wrong. I figured I'd check out the clothes just in case. I stepped out of the cab into the cold morning air. The chill actually helped keep me awake. I approached the clothing cautiously. It was definitely children's clothes, a mix of boys' and girls' items. I looked around but couldn't see anything in the dense tree line. I was on high alert now. The thought that this might be some kind of setup crept in. I kept glancing behind me, turning my head constantly. I decided this wasn't something I needed to get involved in, and I started heading back toward the truck. That's when I heard a crunch. It came from the woods to my left. I spun around, squinting into the dark, heart pounding. I stood frozen, listening. 30 seconds later, I heard another crunch, this time from the opposite side of the road. That was enough. I bolted to the truck and climbed into the cab. But just as I grabbed the door to shut it, I heard a child scream. My whole body went rigid. It didn't sound far away. Now I was torn. I wasn't about to go charging into a pitch-black forest after some strangers. But if there really were kids out there, how could I leave them? Before I could make up my mind, another scream rang out, just like the first one. Without thinking, I fired up the engine and turned the headlights toward the source of the sound. What I saw made my blood run cold. About 30 yards into the woods, I could just make out several figures ducking behind trees. 3, maybe 4 of them. One of them was holding a big speaker. They weren't kids, they weren't lost. They were using that speaker to fake the sounds to bait me in. I just stared. They tried to stay hidden in the shadows, but I'd already seen enough. I reached for my phone, ready to call the cops. But before I could even start dialing, something slammed into the side of my truck. Someone had thrown something hard from the other side of the road. I was done. I turned my focus back to the road, floored the gas pedal, and peeled out of there. As I sped away, I caught sight of a figure standing on the shoulder. He yelled something at me, then hurled something else. It cracked the passenger side window. The final hour of that drive was dead silent. I was too shaken to process anything, and there was no way I was going to stop again until I reached my drop-off point. I made the delivery, parked the truck, and passed out. Slept for nearly 10 hours straight. First thing I did when I woke up was report what happened. The police said they'd check out the area and follow up if they found anything. I never heard from them again. Looking back, I realize how reckless I was. I shouldn't have gotten out in the first place. But the thought of children in danger, it overrode everything. I still don't know what those people were trying to do that night. Why they didn't just rush me, or what would have happened if I'd gone into the woods alone. Out of all my years on the road, I've never experienced anything as disturbing or as frightening as that night. I was driving my usual route from Omaha, Nebraska to Fargo, North Dakota, a trip I make a few times each month. Personally, I really enjoy it. The whole journey cuts through open farmland, making for an easy, low-stress drive with very little traffic to worry about. Because I'd done this route so many times, I always made the same stops. My go-to-rest spot was a truck stop, located between two tiny towns in South Dakota, sort of the halfway point of the drive. It was a surprisingly large stop, considering how quiet the route was, and there were usually only a couple of other trucks parked there when I came through. Anyway, the first leg of the trip went fine, and I pulled into the truck stop just after 1 a.m. But as soon as I arrived, I could tell something was off. The main building was completely boarded up, and all the fuel pumps had been ripped out. The lights that usually lit up the lot were dark. It was clear the whole place had been shut down, abandoned. I wasn't exactly shocked, but it did throw off my usual plan. Now I had to either keep driving for another hour or try to sleep at this pitch-dark, deserted lot. Under normal circumstances, I probably would have just stayed, but that night I didn't even entertain the idea. I pulled straight back onto the highway. Not long after I started second-guessing that choice, I was struggling to keep my eyes open. I didn't make it more than 15 minutes before I had to pull off onto the gravel shoulder, slapping my cheeks and trying to shake myself awake. I looked around. I was in the middle of nowhere, just open land and road. I knew it wasn't ideal, but dozing off while driving seemed way more dangerous than napping in my locked cab. Other drivers did it all the time, so I figured it was safe enough. I turned off the engine, locked the doors, put the shades on the windows, and leaned the seat back. But no matter how tired I was, I couldn't seem to fall asleep. I must have been lying there for 20 minutes when I heard something strange. A soft squeaking sound like an old brake system coming from behind my trailer. I leaned up, listening more carefully, and caught the faint hum of an idling engine. I was confused, but I tried to convince myself it might be a highway patrol car doing rounds. I pulled down one of the window covers and glanced at the side mirror. I couldn't tell exactly what kind of car it was, but I could tell for sure it wasn't law enforcement. Before I had time to think it through, I heard someone call out, just one word, "Hey." It instantly sent a chill down my spine. I fired up the engine, which always takes a few seconds to get going, and the second it roared to life, I heard the sound of fast footsteps. Whoever it was ran right up to the passenger door and started yanking on the handle. As I slowly started moving forward, the person leapt up and clung to the side of the cab, staring right at me through the window. He looked to be in his early 40s, had a thick salt and pepper beard, and wore a dark hooded sweatshirt pulled over his head. He began slamming his fist against the glass, and just as I picked up some speed, the window shattered. I snapped my head to the side, but by the time I looked back, he was gone. I caught a glimpse of him in the side mirror. He was rolling across the shoulder, either because he jumped or lost his grip. I didn't slow down, I just kept pushing the gas, until there was no sign of him or his vehicle behind me. I reported the incident to the authorities, but it took them over half an hour to get to the area. By then, all they found were broken shards of glass scattered on the asphalt. If that guy had managed to break the window even a few seconds sooner, there's a good chance he could have reached inside and opened the door. And honestly, I don't even want to imagine what would have happened after that. If there's one takeaway from this experience, it's that if something doesn't feel right, don't wait. Trust your gut and move. A few seconds could be the difference between getting away and not getting away at all.